Welcome to the Victoria Rumble Room, a little show that could, as we cover local, provincial, and sometimes national and global events. I'm Robin Adair, and across town in his Saanich lair is the Croatian sensation himself, John Jurisic. John, there's so much going on this week.
Oh, Robin, nice intro. The little show that could, the little show that has. You know, we've started this project in April, you and I, aside from all of these issues that are going on. Yeah, we just do it for fun, interviewing people. We've been around. We've got these deep chamber networks, business networks. Why not? Let's take advantage of digital media and Zoom. Boom. Today we're like over 105,000 cumulative views. Beautiful. On Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on TikTok, of all things. I tell you, this is something that's generated some interest, and certainly you and I seem to be doing the right thing.
So, John, how do people follow? How can somebody, if they like this show, say, I want to follow the Rumble Room, so that every week it'll just get sent their way? They'll know that it's on again because they'll get a notice and the Rumble Room will be there. How do you follow the show?
Exactly. So that of those five platforms I identified, the two that'll actually trigger a notice to be sent to you would be our Facebook site, Victoria Rumble Room with John and Robin, and our YouTube site. So you subscribe to the YouTube site and become you like our Facebook site, and you'll be sent these extraordinary sessions.
Yeah. You know, I do have to say there is an awful lot going on this week. We're not going to have a lot of time for this, but I do notice that there's now a bit of an uprising because people aren't getting their booster shots. Apparently, we've got a huge backlog of booster shots, and there is a lot of vaccine available, but there's no program yet in place. And people are wondering, what's Bonnie Henry doing? What's she waiting for? Because people are starting to get sick again in long-term care, even if they're double vaccinated. They're saying the booster will really help for those who want to travel, go overseas, go to other places. There'd be comfort in getting a booster, especially for people in rarefied age groups, John. So I'd like to see that happen. Just as a point of interest, I see it's a hot topic rearing its head again this week, and maybe we'll get more info on that. It's great to have Bill Cavers on last week for his feelings about the whole pandemic. So we're pleased that we're able to tap in on that issue. But we've got other fish to fry this morning. And I'm not saying they're bigger fish, but they're other fish. And the fish I'm talking about are the Victoria Police, which is actually the Victoria Esquimalt Police. And on the board, the co-chair of that board is Barb Desjardins. And we're going to be talking to her in just a few moments about the police asking for about 20 to 30 new members because there's so much problem downtown. Mm-hmm. The board says we can get you 6, and Esquimalt saying, well, hey, you know, we don't really have the same problem as Victoria. We've broken down the stats. Esquimalt doesn't have nearly the crime rate that we're seeing in Victoria. So we'll hear Barb Desjardins speak on that in a moment. But first, a quick word on this BC Liberal leadership and a new controversial leadership candidate who's now on the scene.
As most of you know, on Saturday, I officially declared my candidacy for the leadership of the soon-to-be renamed BC Liberal Party and the premiership of British Columbia. And within a matter of hours, the lies, innuendo, and outright fabrications had already begun, beginning with an absurd press release from the NDP, followed by coordinated attacks by their MLAs that accused me of racism, sexism, transphobia, and basically everything under the sun. Now, for those of you who have been following me for a while, you of course know that none of this is even remotely true.
The BC Liberals certainly are at a risky crossroads right now in their party leadership if they allow Aaron Gunn to officially run. After all, there are Liberals and Conservatives in this party. It's not really a Liberal party, it's a coalition. So what happens? The party hierarchy have reasons to be concerned. Gunn is a conservative voice from Victoria who has 100,000 social media followers. Imagine the clout that would have in a close leadership race. Also imagine the opposition to carbon tax. That's Aaron Gunn's position, not the position necessarily of a lot of BC Liberals, including Gordon Campbell, who brought in the carbon tax in the first place. How will small L Liberals feel about that? And also, how will they react to his open tent membership policy, where he actually is open to social conservatives speaking their mind and being part of the party? It's a problem for some small L Liberals. And now a lot of Liberals will resonate with some of Gunn's views. He wants to get tough on crime. He wants to do something about putting up facilities for people who are mentally ill and are addicted to drugs. And a lot of folks wouldn't mind seeing a name change, something other than BC Liberals. This is a coalition. So in the end, it's a dilemma. If they allow Aaron Gunn to run, party unity could suffer. But if they say no, some conservatives could walk from the party and join the still tiny BC Conservative Party. And that's another big problem. So of course, all music to the ears of John Horgan and the NDP. We'll just have to sit back and see what happens.
Well said, Robin. Well said. Be fascinating to follow this issue over time. And time is running out. I think that they'll be voting on their new leader sometime in the new year, which is just around the corner. And we'll keep a close eye on these developments. But now let's jump into another massive issue. That is local policing, a very hot issue these days, considering all that's going on in downtown Victoria. According to Esquimalt Mayor Barb Desjardins, her community is paying big taxes to fight the rising crime rate in Victoria's downtown. In contrast, however, Esquimalt, in fact, I guess I could say this, where you live, has a low crime rate. Slightly higher than Oak Bay, where we think there's no crime. Generally speaking, if you live in the Lower Vancouver Island, she is saying that a regional police force is needed so other communities can pay their fair share.
It's not a fair model, and it does need to change. And both Victoria and Esquimalt have consistently said we need to move to a regionalized model. The big challenge is that you have Victoria with all of the core city issues. They have a lot of visitors that come from around the rest of the region, visitors that come from beyond. They have many of the social services downtown. They have a significant business sector that includes, pubs, etc. So all of that adds up to is contributing to their higher crime rate. When Esquimalt was amalgamated with Victoria, it was thought that we were going to be the beginning of a number of communities being amalgamated together for policing services. Well, that was back in 2003. We're almost 20 years later and nothing else has happened, despite discussions with provincial governments, no matter what their stripes. And there does not seem to be any appetite to move forward with regionalization unless everyone agrees. So how are you going to encourage Saanich to come in when we know it's going to cost them more? And Oak Bay when we know it would cost them more because it's for the greater good. It would certainly help out Esquimalt an awful lot, I'll tell you.
Great to hear from Mayor Desjardins. Barb Desjardins is somebody we really will closely monitor in this, as she's the co-chair of the Victoria Esquimalt Police Board, some big decisions for them. And apparently they really don't have much support in the provincial government to do anything about bringing the police together or amalgamating the police or even being able to pull out of their agreement with the city of Victoria. So some decisions have to be made, and they're all difficult decisions. And someone else who's very closely following this is Sergeant Matt Waterman. He's the executive director of the Victoria City Police Union. We've spoken to him before. He's on the line. Let's zoom him in. And now joining us in the Rumble Room, as promised, is Sergeant Matt Waterman. Matt, great to have you back on the program.
Yeah, great to be back with you guys. I know last time, I think Robin and John, didn't you ask for somebody else to come on and maybe a prettier face than mine? And I think I can still work on that for you.
I think the list actually wasn't very long to get at that time. You're one of our very first guests, so we were so pleased to have you on. And I don't know if you have heard, but we have now over 100,000 views for this show. So things have picked up, and we're grateful that you were one of our first, because it gives us a lot of incentive when we have great guests. So
yeah,
we've got lots of new questions for you, so this is good. Question one. The police board, the Victoria Esquimalt City Police Board, have been talking about 6 new members for the Victoria Police Force. We hear about low morale, we hear about the workload, the rising crime rate, all of that. 6 new members, and I've seen, I believe it was you quoted saying we really could use 20 to 30 new members, and I don't think that's going to happen. So you think, well, maybe we should have amalgamation of the police forces. Maybe all the 13 municipalities should be contributing, because let's face it, citizens from every municipality go downtown regularly. And it's not that they're creating a problem, but they're part of the fabric of our downtown as well, but they're not paying the taxes. Do you see any hope of that happening, an amalgamated police force on your watch?
No, I don't think so. I've been here 30 years, and it's been a part of the discussion for all of those 30 years and even before. But, you know, even though it's not going to happen, I do think we need to come up with different ways to look for options to fund the downtown policing costs. You know, one of the things that's come to my attention recently is Victoria Police has dealt with over 100 protests in 2021 already. Not that we had to deploy police to every single one of them. We may have just had to send a police car by to make sure everything was fine. But those are 100 protests that don't occur in Saanich or Oak Bay. It does require some resources. And let's be honest here, those protesters and or the people who come to support or even speak out against the protest are from other municipalities. And it's not just a Victoria issue, but we, of course, have the legislative grounds where people are entitled to make their voice heard.
Now, you were one of our first guests on the show, as Robin indicated, and that generated a lot of feedback. That was probably one of the first times, Robin, that you and I said, a few people are listening to this, you know, and that was an interesting moment. And so we've had a lot of feedback. A lot of folks have been watching. Very much appreciate.
John, you know, for this interview, I decided to look back, and it was 6 months ago, basically, wasn't it? And
right,
we had the provincial government buying hotels to get people out of tents. We didn't have the police vaccinated yet, and Justin Trudeau was the prime minister. But we've only fixed one of those things.
But you know, right. Police are top of mind for everyone.
Yeah.
Police and crime issues, and so obviously, hearing about it daily, the consequences, the financial implications. You were referencing historically what we did 6 months ago. About a year ago, there was quite a significant controversy around Black Lives Matter in the States, and there's some negative feedback and negative thoughts about policing. Has this sort of almost daily barrage of news around crime and police and the downtown, has it helped your constituency of police officers and what you do?
I would say that the pressure on, even from a year ago, around those movements, if you want to call it, definitely caused some stress around our membership. I think now we've also noticed that it may be contributing to people leaving the vocation. We've had a few resignations recently. There's some likelihood that people will apply to outside of Victoria, which, I don't know if that's a specific issue to just us being as busy as we are. But when people are leaving policing, which is a pretty, well thought of career and important function, that's a concern for me, that they're actually leaving the job and just saying, you know what, the rhetoric doesn't make it easy to work here, and that's definitely a concern, and that's one of the reasons that the Victoria City Police Union is speaking out on some of these issues to say, look, we need your support. We need council support. We can't have council ignoring the fact that we need more police just because it's part of their political narrative. That's garbage.
Well, of course, it all lands on taxpayers, and police is a big part of the tax bill every year. And I know there isn't a municipality in Canada that doesn't wrestle with that. Police and fire are their two biggest expenses, and I know that even 6 policemen, that's not a small undertaking if you're trying to keep taxes level. However, we have this terrible problem, and you wonder how it's going to get paid for. I wanted to get into the stats on crime for a second with you, Matt. There's a lot of pushback on our show. We get a lot of people saying, oh, you guys are blowing this thing way out of proportion, all this talk about crime. There's lots of evidence that the crime rate has dropped significantly over the years. There's less crime than there's ever been. And you're just blowing this out about how it's dangerous downtown and the police are under all this stress. And we should just be compassionate to those people rather than worrying about police actions. So could you speak to the stats that have been out about the amount of crime that there actually has been in Victoria and how that compares to the rest of the country?
Well, I find it interesting where the stats that we have used in some of our press releases have been to show that the crime severity index, the violent crime severity index has increased. And then as soon as we put that stat out, there's always someone who comes out with an opposing stat who says, oh, crime's down since 1991 or whatever. Well, statistics are collected differently nowadays. So there's always, if someone has a stat, someone has an opposing stat, it just seems to be that. And I've always been an advocate for, I don't care what the stats say. Our people are stressed out. They're busy. Our caseload per officer across the province is way higher than even Vancouver, which even makes me shake my head. I don't understand why. Like, how can that be? How can 1,000 people in Vancouver not be as busy as our people here in Victoria? But according to the statistics that I've seen, Victoria has a higher caseload per officer. And but that never gets, it gets discounted, I guess, for the people who don't want to hear that stat.
And serious crime is on the rise here too. I mean, everybody says, well, it's just small stuff. It's B&Es. It's people behaving badly downtown. But there's also a rise in serious crime, is there not?
Yeah, and so those serious crimes, maybe they affect a small group of society. But I would actually add that the medium crimes, if you want to call it that, or less serious crimes, are what affects most of our population. And the population is the one who needs to speak up and say, look, this isn't acceptable either, just because it's not as serious as what's caused them problems. Nobody wants to have their home broken into and their motorcycle stolen or whatever it is. But the serious level with serious assaults on the street and so on, those are concerning, and the level of violence and I've made a couple of pitches over the last 6 months to say, the revolving door at the courthouse has to stop too, or at least hold people accountable. What's the consequences, I guess, is the question, right? What's the consequences for someone who commits a serious offense? And nobody wants to have that person back out on the street committing another serious offense while they're on probation.
Well, I've had a long time ago when I was thin and I had hair, I was very much involved in martial arts. So I have some confidence in my ability to handle myself in a confrontation. Okay. Right. But the thought of being assaulted on a street and then having to go the next day and just keep working is unimaginable for me. Yeah. And that happens on a regular basis to your members.
John, the incident where our officer was run down in the street by the car, that hit a lot of people pretty hard. The officer who was speaking with him when he was hit, is close friends with him, and that has an effect. You know, if it was someone that maybe didn't know him as well, maybe it wouldn't have affected everyone so much, but that can have a long lasting effect. And not only is that officer going to be off physically for months, but the emotional side of watching your friend almost killed,
Right.
it has an impact. And, you know, and it has an impact on the people who were like, oh my God, what just happened? And why was that person targeted? Is it because they're wearing a blue uniform and am I next?
Right.
That has a longer lasting effect, I think.
So, Matt, I have a final question for you. It's not a small one, but it's a final one for today. We had you on the show, as you say, about 6 months ago. We were just getting organized. The province was getting organized to start opening hotels, buying apartment buildings, starting to put people into indoor facilities and get them out of the parks and out of the tents. And now we hear that people don't want to stay necessarily. They don't want to be warehoused. And there's not really a lot of supervision for that. We had Stephen Andrew, the counselor, on this show a couple of weeks ago talking about touring down on the boulevards, down on Pandora. And a lot of the people there did have accommodation inside, but they chose to be back in tents because they missed all their pals. And I have to think that we only went halfway, that the province really needs to do more. I know they're just announced $132 million in more beds for people with addictions. That's a step in the right direction. But would you think that we need an awful lot more help from both senior levels of government? You can't just put people in accommodation, walk away and say, well, that solves the problem, because then it's back in the police's front door before you know it.
Yeah, two things, Robin. The first part, you know, the provincial government, Mr. Eby has talked about the complex care plan. You know, I'm going to call him out a bit on that, because my understanding is there's no police people who are part of that discussion. And I disagree. We're the frontline people, and we need to be part of that discussion. In fact, I heard there was no VHA people who were part of that discussion initially. Apparently, they may be part of that team, I guess, that's looking at that. But you know, in that complex care plan, that's exactly what we're talking about. We can spend all the money we want on doors and beds, but what else are we doing to support those people? And the second part that I just want to highlight, you know, we heard from Julian Daly down at our place, and there's now discussion about, you know what, maybe treatment needs to be pushed harder, and that you don't have a choice. And you know, that's a huge discussion, but I know if I had a loved one who was suffering from addiction, how do you get them off the street?
Wow, always great to speak to Matt Waterman. Second time. I don't know if that's a sign of things that are going on, but important issues, important people we need to talk to about these issues. He's been a member of the Victoria City Police for 30 years, really knows his way around these issues.
You know, he really does, John, and that's why it's so important to hear these voices and hear them consistently on the Rumble Room and around town. And there's more that I know Matt's concerned about, including the Canadian justice system and this whole idea of catch and release. They arrest people, they're out sometimes the same day, certainly within a day or so. There's nowhere to incarcerate people. A lot of people don't actually end up hardly even in court, because we apparently have a shortage of judges. And there's a situation now where we're just not being protected by our legal system. At least that's the feeling of a lot of people, including, I think, many members of the police force. So on the Rumble Room next week to talk about that will be lawyer Troy D'Souza, who we are good friends with and has been around town for a long time, both as a legal counsel and as a political candidate in the past. And so he knows both sides of the road. He knows a lot about why the system perhaps is not working, and also the machinations behind the scenes in government about why we are where we are and why the courts are operating the way they do. So looking forward to speaking to Troy.
Yeah, we've known Troy for a while, both publicly and personally. And as we start to dig deeper into this a police issue, a crime issue, it's exposing so many multifacets to the solution. potential solution. So I have many questions for Troy. Do we have enough judges? You just referenced that. Do we not have enough criminal lockups? You referenced that. Is that why people are breaking the law when they're almost immediately back on the street? I think if I broke the law, I'd be gone for some time. I'm not getting this. So what does the charter have to say about all? So many questions, Robin.
And can the law be changed? I mean, I think that's what politicians are supposed to do. That judges are there to interpret the law, and the law courts are supposed to enforce what's there. But if the laws get changed, the public doesn't even know about it. We're stuck with some of these situations, and you wonder who's going to fix it. And I'm very concerned about it. So, John, we're nearing the end of the show. One more quick reminder about how people can follow us and support the show and help the Rumble Room move on to a bigger and better future.
Exactly. Well, we're on the road to 200,000 now, aren't we? Holy mackerel.
Yes.
And as I identified earlier, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok. The links have now surprisingly emerged, and you can see them all around us. Think about following on Facebook. Think about subscribing on YouTube. Not only, I think, are we presenting fun issues, we're mildly entertaining, you and I. We're certainly having a lot of fun. I am John Jurisic, known by family, friends, the universe of people and aliens as the Croatian sensation.
And for many years, whenever they played introductory music, whenever I would speak in public, they used to always throw on Michael Jackson, Rockin' Robin. I used to really dislike that song, but I've taken it on as my handle for the Rumble Room. It's Rockin' Robin Adair and Rumble On!